Okay, there it is.
Hello, and welcome to the February 3rd monthly community meeting for Operator SDK. We got a pretty short agenda today, so let's go ahead and get started. Let me make sure I don't have anything that I don't want the internet to see. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Well, a couple times I've forgotten that the host key is on that screen. Hopefully this works.
Yeah, I see it.
Agenda?
Yep.
Okay. Zeus.
All right. So the first item I wanted to bring up, there was a issue written up where, so we have an Operator SDK image now, which just has the Operator SDK binary on it. So there was a request to add the tools that we use, like Customize, EnvTest, and Controller Gem. So there was a PR that was created by another contributor. They made a separate Docker file. During that review of that PR, Joe mentioned, "Oh, it would be nice to put these on the Operator SDK image." I agreed, so I went down that path. So I created a new PR, adding Customize and Controller Gen to the Operator SDK. But then we realized that with V3 and V2, they use different versions of Customize and different versions of Controller Gem. So now the latest comment in the PR was maybe we should separate these by version for Customize and for... so that's where we are. And I figured before I start just mucking around with more PRs, what do we think we should be doing? I know that there's been asks for one of the primary uses for this Operator SDK image is probably to use it to create a development environment or use it in pipelines. So those are kind of the use cases, but I don't want to put we could say, hey, we support V3, that's the default. Then we'll put in the Controller Gen and Customize for those. But if you end up using this image to do V2, then it may likely not work.
I feel like trying to make an image that supports all the old versions is a fool's errand.
Yeah. So on that issue, actually on your PR, and then I copied the what I commented on the PR into this issue. You scroll all the way to the bottom. I basically outlined the three options that I see in my mind, two of which involve either like naming the image with the Go plugin or with a plugin name, or naming it with the plugin version and name. And below, I explained why those are really not scalable. Mainly because every time we release an Operator SDK version, the SDK binary itself supports all of these plugins. So we'd have to build a new image for all three, like the SDK, Controller Gen, Customize, every single time we release an SDK version, even though the tools aren't changing at all. And like you shouldn't have to rebuild those.
For option 1 and 2?
Yeah, for option 1 and 2.
And you're also going to create a precedent that when we make Ansible Operator V2 and Helm V2, then plugins, you could end up blowing those up as well.
Yeah, exactly. So you're creating this like really annoying build matrix that we shouldn't have to. So my third suggestion is to just build supported images of these tools at the particular versions. And so you'd only ever have to build these once every time you added or updated the version of a tool. So that you would only have to like build Operator SDK, the Operator SDK image on each release of the Operator SDK. And you wouldn't have to rebuild any of these other tool images.
Maybe I'm a bit confused by what exactly this entails. How would these separate images be used exactly?
In the same way as the Operator SDK image. So I think the main use case here for this Operator SDK image is like adding it to your makefile so that you don't have to actually download any of these tools. So you would call like Operator SDK image generate bundle, for example, instead of calling the tool directly in your local environment. And so you could do the same thing with customize and controller gen.
And you could still probably get away with trying to build a development environment by stacking all of these different images, copying them to a dev environment one, and building it from there, and still be able to do that, which is another thing that someone was trying to do.
Would we provide any sort of compatibility matrix, or am I just supposed to have to figure out which one I need to pick myself?
Well, it's scaffolded for you when you initialize a project, like whichever version you need. And then I would just say, like in some FAQ documentation, or honestly, we should just fully document the fact that these images exist. Say that if you would like to use an image, take the version that you see in your makefile and just add it to the tag name of the tool image that you're looking for. So yeah, more or less, we would document what the compatibility is between all the plugins.
The other problem I saw when I was doing this was that controller gen and customize, typically we just do a curl of them, but they only support a limited, they have a subset of the arches that we support. So in my PR, I was doing a go get, hoping that it would rebuild them for the arch, because we're going to build an S390 and a PPC image of the SDK. So the hope was this would build them for those arches. Env test, I couldn't figure out how to do a go get on. So I had left that off, but if we do it our own image builds, like option 3, we could build them for the different arches. The problem we run into now is if any of those are not really supported on those arches. Like if we build an S390 of customize, what support issues are we going to run down?
Does customize not support?
They don't build them, is what I'm saying. If you go to the download page, I think it only has like PPC, AMD. No, it doesn't have PPC. I think it's x86-64 or Darwin.
Oh, interesting. But do they explicitly state that they support?
They don't explicitly state that they support the other arches. At least I didn't find anything. I just know that if you try to do the curl with S390 as the arch, it won't find it. There's nothing there.
Huh. That's interesting. I mean, now we're getting into dependency support statements. A can of worms.
And I mean, when it comes to creating the SDK, most people are probably not using an S390 to do their development on.
Yeah.
So when they run SDK, it's probably not to do the operator development tasks. It might be used for run bundle, maybe, or maybe not at all for those. But
so I think this is a great point to bring up, and another thing that we should document, where like we support builds. Well, I guess the problem is that we do support building Operator SDK for S390X. So if you did want to develop, but maybe we should also document that we will not build tool versions for tools that, or we will not build tools for architectures that they don't support, because we don't want to build a customized for S390X, have it break, then have users come to us saying this is broken, and we throw up our hands and say, well, we technically say we support it even though customized doesn't. So I'd much rather avoid that situation.
Why do we?
And that's, what's that?
Oh, like what? Why do we build binaries for things that our dependencies don't support?
That's a great question. Maybe we shouldn't.
So yes, and that does go down the why. We didn't do this initially, but then folks were trying to use the image for either development purposes in terms of, hey, I want to make this as my base image for a dev environment or a pipeline. And the minute they tried to run Operator SDK to do something, then it either tried to look up controller gen or customize, and they didn't have them. And they thought it would be nice.
Yeah.
So that's how we got here.
Yeah. Yeah. Originally, we didn't have any of these tools. We could just use the Operator SDK binary, and therefore we could support S390X. But now that we shell out to different tools through the makefile, we implicitly think that those tools support the architectures that the SDK does. So I think the right place to start here is start building images for all of the tools, for all the architectures that those tools support officially. And then if we get requests, then we will percolate this upstream. And I mean, we could even be proactive about it and open up issues upstream for those particular architectures in those tool repos.
So in this case, it sounds like for customized controller gen mtest, whatever art subset of arches are supported upstream, we can go ahead and build those. So if it's 2 or 3 arches, we build those 3. And then if we get requests for the other ones, we can go, or we can open up issues for S390 and PPC if we want upstream.
Yeah.
To at least get that down the pipeline. Okay. And then document this.
Yeah. So to begin with, out of those 3 options, does the individual tool images sound the best to everybody? That is a leading question, but I'd like your opinion.
It's like what I do with my kids. You want milk or water? You get a choice of what you want to drink. So out of these 3, which one do you like? Out of those 3 does sound the most doable. Because like you said, 1 and 2 already, that's just going to blow the matrix up. And the PR that I had, option 0, which is just include the latest, starts to create other problems.
What? Sorry, I keep going back to this. What is the envisioned, like? How do we expect people to actually use these? They already generated a project, and they have a project file and a make file that say what versions of these they use, and then they're like in a pipeline somewhere, and they already have their project written to disk, and they're like, okay, based on that make file, go pull these versions of the images. How do they make the thing to begin with?
Sorry, can you say that one more time? I didn't quite catch your meaning.
So the versions for if everything's built in a separate image, and we're envisioning that they know they need customized 3.5.4 because that's the version specified in their makefile, correct?
Yeah.
But they had to have already had a working installation of Operator SDK to generate that makefile, right?
Yep.
And this is just for like ease of use in a CI environment.
I think you can also run the Operator SDK from an image. So even if you didn't have it installed,
but wouldn't that image need these dependencies? And wouldn't, if they don't have that make file, have like just see a big list
Nope.
of versions and not know which one to pick?
Yep.
Well, the Operator SDK doesn't shell out internally to customize your controller gen. The make file that it scaffolds does. So that make file, in that make file, you would embed these images instead of the raw binary.
So that means in theory, I could use the Docker, the SDK Docker image to run an init. And then in that make file, change the areas to be images to run customize, mtest, etc.
Yeah, exactly.
And never actually have it installed locally.
Okay, that sounds fine. Yeah, I.
And then if you're creating, if you want to create your own pipeline builder, you could use these images as builder images, copy what you need from them, or layer them. I think that might be doable. Okay.
Yeah, that sounds fine. Are we gonna try and dog food this and use these in our own pipeline?
We could.
I didn't think that far ahead.
I think part of the problem is it does increase complexity in our E2E tests because we'd have to do a bunch of makefile substitutions. I mean, ultimately, these images are just wrappers around binaries that we already use. So these really should work by default. I guess, so one thing I was thinking we could do here is, like in Kube Builder, have a separate branch in the SDK that only contains like some build scripts for the tool binaries that we use. Also, excuse the construction that's going on overhead. I'm sure that's very annoying. So we have a separate branch, and then every time that branch gets updated, some build process kicks off to build these images. And then after that build process completes, we could have an end-to-end test run with these binaries, with these images instead of binaries. I still think that's a little heavy-handed and unnecessary, but it's a possibility. In particular, the end-to-end tests, just because of like how these images are built.
Well, I don't know. My just thinking was like,
why build them if we're not going to use them?
Yeah.
Type of thing. Yeah.
Like, if we think these things are a good idea, then why wouldn't we want to be using them? If we think they're an awful idea, because it needlessly increases build complexity in the pipeline, then why are we making them in the first place? If what we're already doing is easier than using these images, why would a third party figure out how to set up all that crap in their pipeline?
The main reason is so they don't have to install Go. And I mean, you could not install Go by just using this curl command. But if you could, instead of using that curl command, just say docker pull this image, then, that is easier to some people.
Here's a dumb question. Now that you said Docker pull, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off in this one. It starts to sound like, why aren't these part of the upstream?
What do you mean? Like these images
why
don't
isn't
already exist?
customize? If this customize is just an image with customize on it, why not it? Why isn't it part of the? Well, customize really doesn't care. Maybe they don't care.
I don't think they care
as an image. Yeah. Okay. I answered my own question. Thank you.
Yeah. No, I mean, these are fair questions. Like, why, if we're not going to use this ourselves? Should we build it? And mainly it's because we've gotten requests to use it, but I don't think it's the common case. So therefore, we won't be testing it in our end-to-end tests. And not to say that like we won't test any uncommon case in the end-to-end tests. It's just that this is one of those cases where like using the binary directly is the same thing as using the image via Docker run. Like there's no difference.
Okay.
So yeah, just because there have been a few requests for this, and we can definitely see a use case. I mean, we already built the Operator SDK binary. Like, why not build tool? We already built Operator SDK image. Why not also build tool images? I think this is a fair request. So I guess if we're all agreed on that solution, then I think there are a few things that we need to do. One is create these Docker files to build all these different images. Two is create the appropriate Quay repos for each tool. And three, actually build the images from a separate branch or some tools repo that we create. We'll still have to discuss that, I think. And then four, document how to use them and how to replace them in your makefile.
Okay. Could you write that in a comment on this issue?
I can do that. I just wrote it down on my trusty little Post-it.
Cool. So maybe we should, well, we could probably come back to discussing how to actually build these images and probably have an async discussion in this issue particularly.
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
That satisfies my topic, my question.
Anything else? Want to get this PR into 1.4?
Okay, so this one, there was a problem that someone had a really long operator name, and when they did run bundle, all of a sudden the image that the pod name we were trying to create was dash their username dash the operator name in a version, and the leading dash is invalid. Can't have leading and trailing hyphens. Once we looked through the code, it was down in the trim. When we go to trim it, what we were doing was, if it was too long, we basically said trim off anything off the front to make it so that it's short enough. But we didn't go back to check to see that we did not create an invalid label. So the label coming in was valid. After we trimmed it, is now invalid. And also, as part of this, the format function was taking in a string, replacing all the gobbledygook with hyphens and calling it done. But if it had leading or trailing gobbledygook, it would add hyphens, make those into hyphens, which now makes an invalid DNS 1123 string. So I fixed format so that it will always trim any leading or trailing dashes after it has formatted it properly. Format does not shorten it. I left that functionality alone. Trim will now, when it shortens it, will make sure that it is still valid. And then I added test cases for it, including a good example that caused the problem.
Yeah, I actually noticed that there's another potential bug that isn't solved by this. And this is a really good start to fixing the problem. But what about where, let me think. So if you have like a super long name, then you could potentially, given how the trimming and formatting is set up, potentially have a naming conflict between two different object names, and that would cause errors. So
Yep.
I think what also needs to be done is, after this is all all the hyphens are substituted in, if the name is still too long, then you just take the first letter of each hyphenated word and make that into a initialism and use that as the name.
Isn't
For the
that already the case? Like, even before we add this bit, if we're doing DNS like name replacement, isn't it already possible if there's a collision?
Well, yeah, there is a possibility of that right now. But at least this change will create valid DNS 1123 labels in the general case.
So you're saying for the format version, if after it was done and it's long, to not hyphenate, but initialize the beginning of the string?
This is
trim.
actually external to the format and trim functions.
Oh,
this is
okay.
in the actual run package manifest and run bundle code.
So the part that's using it. So these two functions, this is the first part. And then the piece that's using these functions, the caller of these, also has to do that extra step of, okay, let me make sure that I'm not creating conflicts here.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. I can do that.
So yeah, this is a good first step. I mean, even if you want to, I have one more suggestion, but if you want to get this merged first and then follow up with something else, that would be fine. Or you can do it all in one PR. And I think doing it all in one PR makes sense. It's just depending on your preference.
Okay. Did you add your other suggestion or preference on here?
I will after this meeting.
Okay. Okay.
This should only happen during the initialize step. It's not. I was going to say, it's not a possibility that you had some input that generated a name, and now it's generating a different name, so that's going to break stuff between different versions.
No, this is all the name generation is deterministic, but I think your question is more like, if I do run package manifest and then run package manifest again with a different operator SDK version, will this break? The answer is maybe. So I guess by implication, yes. So I think we need to also guard against that happening.
So say that scenario again.
So because of how run package manifest works, it uses the existing registry in the cluster as like a cache, and if the cache is still valid, then it won't recreate the registry. So theoretically, if you run Operator SDK run package manifests with 1.3, Operator SDK 1.3, then we merge this change and you run the same command with 1.4, then the command might break because it can't find the registry because it has a different name.
Trying to think, because if 1.3 generated a valid name, the way this one was changed, without making the second change of the initialize piece. I would assume this should make the same names.
So this change, I think what you're saying is like this change that you've currently made
Yes. Yes.
will not be a breaking change because it didn't work in the first place.
Exactly. And if you did,
Yeah.
if it did pass and you actually created it with 1.3, then that running it with 1.4 will still work because you already had a working one. But in 1.3, it would have broken. You wouldn't have been running. So
Yeah.
1.4 would fix that.
Yeah. So the changes as of now are not breaking, but I think the change that I was suggesting is breaking. So that's a great point, Jonathan. So maybe we can't do that change right now.
For your suggested change, wouldn't it also be broken because the name was too long?
Well, it gets trimmed by a particular function, so the name length isn't the problem, but I think there might be a collision problem. And if there is a collision problem, then we would treat this as a bug fix, so it wouldn't actually be a breaking change. But I need to make sure whether that is the case or not.
You want to open a new issue for your thing because it's kind of a different thing?
Yeah, I can do that.
I like that.
That's probably a good idea.
Okay, so this seems fine then.
Cool. Yeah, I will review this after this meeting.
Okay. Thank you, guys. That's all I had. Wow, this meeting is useful.
Look at that.
Okay, that's everything we have on the agenda. Does anyone else have anything they'd like to talk about? If not, I think that's all for today, at least for the next hour and a half until we have the sprint planning meeting for 1.5 or whatever we're on. I don't know, the numbers are all made up. So thanks everybody for coming, and we'll see you next time.
Always interesting. Thanks.
Thanks,
Yeah.
guys.